Andrew Abernethy, Professor of Old Testament at Wheaton College.
Dr. Andrew Abernethy. Andy, welcome back to Exegetically Speaking.
It's great to be on.
I'm so glad that you love the languages. For those of us who've been doing it for a while, there's a camaraderie around the languages.
Yes.
And it's about people who want to dig deeply. It's about people that are interested in Bible translations and all these kind of things. So you run the Master of Arts in Biblical Exegesis program here at Wheaton College. What's a good piece of advice for a student like that?
So those who are just starting out, say in Greek 101 or 102, Hebrew 101 and 102, my best advice is treat the class like you would fitting it into a work week where you need to spread the hours and the time out throughout the week. Imagine trying to say, okay, I got to put 8 hours of work into this, and let me spread this out over 4 or 5 days instead of just kind of cramming at the last minute. Because if you're putting that time in, it's going to sink in more deeply. You're going to be covering your vocab and all the grammar stuff, and it just takes that consistent repetition. My advice for the exegesis students, those who already have the basics, is imagine that you have two arms. And if you strengthen one bicep with just a lot of skills in how to do exegesis, you're going to have a really weak other arm. And so I like to encourage my students to think about strengthening the exegetical skills while also continuing to strengthen their fluency, where they're continuing to learn vocabulary, being very comfortable reading through big blocks of text. So fluency alongside that kind of more technician type skill.
Yeah.
So,
that's both great pieces of advice. Today, Habakkuk 1 and 2 we'll be looking at. That's a lot of Hebrew. We're not going to do it all, are we?
No, we're not. But I want us to look at a repeated collection of verbs that we see occurring throughout that I think opens up the flow of this dialogue you see unfolding between Habakkuk and God here in the start of this book.
It begins with the oracle that Habakkuk the prophet saw. That's how it begins.
Yeah.
So he sees something. Yeah. He's a seer, but he's a prophet. And he goes along, and what does he see? What does he say? How does the words work together?
What's interesting about Habakkuk is he doesn't come out and directly address his audience. Instead, the message unfolds by inviting us listening into Habakkuk's complaint to God and then God's response back to Habakkuk. And you're invited into this learning process, this experience of going through this turmoil. And I want to look at this language of seeing that Habakkuk does. In his opening complaint, he says, "Why do you make me see iniquity? Why do you idly look at wrong?" Habakkuk is surrounded by injustice and violence. He's like, God, why do you make me see? Why do you make me look at these things? These are the two Hebrew verbs, ra'ah and navat. And what's striking is right when God responds in verse 5, he uses those same verbs. He's saying, God, why do you make me see this stuff? And God says, well, I want you to look among the nations and see. Ooh, okay. God's kind of turning the tables here and say, okay, let me invite you to look and see something. I'm up to something. I'm doing something among the nations. See that. And what he invites Habakkuk to see is actually something quite unexpected, that God's rising up a wicked nation to judge his own violent, wicked people in Judah. So Habakkuk still isn't fully set in place by what the Lord has told him to see. And so now Habakkuk uses this language in verses 11 and 12 of seeing again. He says, but God, in verse 13, you who are of purer eyes than to see evil and cannot look at wrong, why do you idly look at traitors? And why are you silent when the wicked swallows up the man more righteous than he? So Habakkuk's still fixated on this seeing and looking motif and now turns it on God. But God, how's it possible that you could look and see all this evil too, just like I'm seeing it? I think he thinks he has this lockdown, knockdown argument that he's just
You
made
think
with
he's
God.
beat God on this one, huh?
Because in 2 verse 1, at the end of his speech, he says, so I'm going to just sit here at my watch post and station on the tower, and I'm going to look out to see what you're going to say to me now. And what's striking is what follows right after this is God say, write out this vision. Step into the scene. I want you to see what's going to happen. The reason why God can look at such evil and see what's happening with Babylon and what Babylon's going to do to Judah is unfolded in verses 2 to 20. What God's saying is, I'm fully aware of the injustice. He brings all sorts of woes against Babylon, and God himself is going to punish Babylon one day. And what God promises in the midst of that is that the person who might not see God fully taking care of all the wickedness in the world, but that person who's willing to wait, and that person who's willing to have faith will live. And that, of course, is what the Apostle Paul quotes.
Habakkuk 2:4.
2:4, the righteous will live by faith. So this invitation into seeing, I think, colors the way we think about faith. Are we willing, amidst all the things we're seeing that don't seem to line up, and even wondering how God can tolerate seeing what we see in the world, are we willing to wait and to see God's long-term vision and trust that he's going to set all things right?
Man, that's a beautiful reading of that text.
Yeah.
Well said. Well
Yeah.
said.
Full, and I think it's a key that helps
And
unfold
so much
the
of
flow
our
here.
seeing is limited. It's the old parade metaphor that all we can see is what's right in front of us at this moment. But
Yeah.
God has this vision of the entire movement.
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
And at any given time in history, all that we see is just one thing, and we fixate upon those things sometimes.
That's right. That's right.
But God says, well, let me tell you what I see.
Yeah.
And I want you to see what I see.
That's
see
right.
this vision.
That's right.
Wonderful. Dr. Andrew Abernethy, thanks for being with us today on Exegetically Speaking.
Thanks for having me on.
Dr. Abernethy has been a faithful supporter of this podcast since its inception in 2018. He's been with us every season, at least once, sometimes twice, and soon we will be starting Season 7. 7, the perfect number. What wonders await. You too can become an expert in the biblical text, but you need to make your way to Wheaton College and get an undergraduate degree in classical languages. Then go on and get a graduate degree in biblical languages and exegesis. But don't stop there. Go on and get your PhD. You can do all of that at Wheaton College. Follow the show notes below for links to tell you what you need to know. Thanks to our audio editor, my wife, Kathy Capes. Thanks to our Wheaton-based team, John Lansma, Jesse Dugan, Rebecca Larson. Thanks to Phil Keggy for our music. Until next time, I'm David Capes. Thanks for listening.